All right, everybody, we're going to talk a little bit about semicolons and colons. Like I said, we're going to continue with some punctuation things, some ideas you might not have known before. And these are ones that are a lot less scary than people might believe. There are really only three rules for semicolons, and there are more rules for colons, but for the most part, you know a bunch of them just on sight. You just don't recognize, oh, yeah, that's a colon. There are really only three rules that I'm going to go over in any detail with colons as well, because those are the ones where people might get a little confused. Okay, so three of each, and you should be good to go with semicolons and colons. Although I will point out at the end a few extra colon rules just in case. So, the first rule for semicolons. Now, I always recommend, or I always tell people that if you know your comma rules, you're going to know your semicolon rules, okay? Because they're very, very similar. Um, I put some different flags up here as an example to help with this idea, but the first rule for semicolons is that if you are separating a list of things that already have commas in them, then you're going to need semicolons to separate those items. Okay? Now, that might sound a little confusing, but if you look at the example, it'll make a lot more sense. So, if we're looking at these flags that we have here, notice that the first flag, the 1818 American flag, has the colors red and white and blue. Okay? But if you go down below, the Irish flag has green and white and orange, and you go to the Canadian flag, it has red and white. All right. Now imagine you're trying to write a sentence where you're telling all the colors that all of these flags have. If I were to just tell you a sentence, okay, the flags have the colors red and white and blue and green and white and orange and red and white. Or if I were to just list it in a list without having and all the way through, if I were to just say, the flag's colors have red, white, blue, orange, green, white, red, and white. Without seeing these flags, you wouldn't know exactly what I was talking about, right? So, here's how you could write that with semicolons so it makes sense. The flag's colors are red, white, and blue, semicolon. So notice there's a comma between red and white, a comma between white and. That's the first flag, so then I can do a semicolon. Green, white, and orange, that's the second flag, so there's a semicolon after that. And red and white. Okay? So I'm listing things that already have commas in it. I'm going to want to put semicolons there. The same would be true if I was listing a group of people with their titles afterwards, or what their job might be after it. Okay? If I were to say the people who attended the meeting were Mr. Trissler, comma, the principal, semicolon, Mr. Cook, comma, the teacher, semicolon, and Mr. Baker, comma, the custodian, period. Okay, I would have to use those semicolons in between each of those because there are commas there too. If I didn't have that, if I just kept using commas, it would look like I'm talking about 6 people instead of 3 people. I'd be saying Mr. Trissler, comma, the principal, comma, Mr. Cook, comma, the teacher, comma, Mr. Baker, comma, the custodian, period. Okay, that would be as if I'm talking about 6 different people, right? So the semicolons help separate things that already have commas in them in a list. All right, so that's rule number 1. Don't know why it's still doing that. Okay, rule number 2. As I mentioned before with the comma rules, when we are separating 2 independent clauses, that means 2 groups of words that can be sentences by themselves, and we put one of those fanboys words, the FANBOYS, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. If we're using one of those between 2 independent clauses, then we have to put a comma before it. Well, with semicolons, we have these things called faith NM words, okay? Now, the technical term for these are conjunctive adverbs, but you don't really need to worry about that. If you just remember faith NM, okay, then that's going to cover these words for you, all right? So those words are, for example, as a result, instead, therefore, however, nevertheless, and moreover. Okay? Now, I can honestly say I've been writing papers and various things for, let's just say, a couple of decades anyway. And in that time, I've used moreover maybe twice in all those papers I've written. But they're still a conjunctive adverb, so I want to show you that that's how they can be used. All right? So each one of these is telling you something about what you're going to say next based on what you said before. So if I have a complete sentence where I'm describing something and then I want to give an example, I would say, for example, and then have another complete sentence, then I would have a semicolon before it. So like this, I like to eat. That can be a sentence by itself. For example, I ate 5 times yesterday. I ate 5 times yesterday could also be a sentence by itself. But this time, instead of the word and or, I have for example. So notice that the semicolon comes before for example. Here's another one. We need warmer weather, semicolon. Therefore, comma, I am building a weather changing machine. Now, I'm not really building a weather changing machine, but the semicolon works here too. One other thing you need to notice with these is notice that each one of them has a comma after it. It says semicolon, for example, comma, or semicolon, therefore, comma, okay? Those words are used as kind of like introductory words to the second complete sentence, to the second independent clause. So you'll always have to put a comma there. And there is a natural pause when you say those anyway. I like to eat. For example, I ate 5 times yesterday. Okay? And if you have any questions about what the other words mean or how you would use them, I'll be happy to explain them later on. Just, bring it up, ask me whatever you would like to do. But this is how they work. Okay, then number 3, I put separating 2 independent clauses. And you might say, well, wait a minute, Mr. Cook, you just said separating 2 independent clauses on the last one. And that is true, but I said separating those with using one of those conjunctive adverbs. Another thing that semicolons can do is they can separate 2 independent clauses just like a period would, except there's a little bit of a difference, okay? First of all, both of the clauses have to go together. Okay, they have to be continuing a thought. And no fanboys words will be used, no conjunctive adverbs, no faith, no more. Look at this example and this will help explain. Bart went outside, he found an alien. Okay? He found an alien is continuing the thought of Bart going outside. Okay, what occurred when he went outside? I have a semicolon there. Notice that the H in he does not get capitalized after a semicolon. That's going to be important when we get to colons because there's another rule with colons similar to this, but not exactly the same. And you'll see that that letter would be capitalized with a colon. So hang on to that thought. Another example would be, I saw an alien. It was my 4th grade teacher. Okay? A period would work there with a capital I after it, but you can also use a semicolon between the two if you are continuing the thought from the first one. Okay? The first one isn't necessarily introducing the second one, it's just a continuance of the thought. Okay, there's a little bit of a difference, and you'll see that when we get to the colon rule. So I saw an alien, it was my 4th grade teacher. You can separate those with just a semicolon and no conjunctive adverb, no faith and M words. Okay? And really that's it. That's all you mainly have to worry about when it comes to semicolons. If you start trying to slap them into other places, you might find you have the wrong piece of punctuation there. Okay, we do have tons of other punctuation, and unfortunately we're not going to get to all of them this year, but I'll do what I can with what we have, and semicolons right here, those are your 3 rules. All right, so let's move on to colons. Speaking of aliens, there's an alien right there. Turns out it's just plaster. Don't be afraid. All right, so with colons, I put 2 clauses once again. Okay, 2 independent clauses. They can be sentences by themselves, is what I'm talking about. But this time, the first clause introduces the second clause. Okay, you can't just have the first one standing alone and think you have all the information you need. Okay, just to check back on this one, Bart went outside. That can be all the information you need for there. You're not expecting more. Okay, you can be given more, but you're not expecting more information. With the colons, you are expecting more. Okay, notice this example right here. I have an idea. Okay, if you were to walk into a room, or let's say somebody were to walk into a room where you're sitting and they just walked in and said, I have an idea, and then they just walked right back out the room, wouldn't you be sitting there wondering, like wanting more information? If somebody said Bart went outside, yeah, you might be thinking, well, who's Bart and, you know, what's going on there? But that was a kind of a complete thought that you aren't necessarily needing to expect more. Okay? In this case, I have an idea. If there's a little pause after that, you're going to wonder, well, what is it? What's the idea? So this is where you would use a colon. I have an idea, colon, let's go to the mall. All right? In this case, notice that the L in let's is capitalized. All right? And the rule of thumb, the way to remember this is notice that at the bottom of the semicolon, it's a comma. Okay? And we don't capitalize after commas. So you wouldn't capitalize after a semicolon. But at the bottom of a colon, if you have 2 independent clauses, you have a period. And we always capitalize after periods. So here you would capitalize after a colon. I have an idea, colon, let's go to the mall. That's the idea that you were talking, that was introduced. Another example might be, you're not going to believe this, colon, Mr. Cook saw an alien. Okay? Which is not true. Just throwing that out there for informational purposes. Once again, if somebody were to walk in a room and say, you're not going to believe this, and then just walked out of the room, you're going to be expecting more information. So that's why you would use a colon instead of a semicolon, because that first one leads you to think more information is coming. Okay, it's introducing the second one. So that's the first colon rule. The second colon rule is when you're introducing lists, and this can be done a couple different ways. I'm sure you've seen them in like maybe school supply lists or something like that, but this is an example one. I am bringing the following items on our trip. Okay, if somebody were to just stop right there, you would say, well, what are they? Because they said the following items. Suitcase, suntan lotion, trombone. Okay? That sounds like a fun trip. Notice that the S in suitcase is not capitalized. And the reason why is because here you're not introducing another complete sentence. You're just introducing a list of things. Okay, there is no verb in that sentence. So you're fine right there with just a lowercase s. I'm bringing the following items on our trip. Colon, suitcase, suntan lotion, trombone. Also notice that I don't have the word and in that list. Okay, even though I'm listing 3 or more things, in this case, I'm listing 3 things, I don't have the word and you don't need that necessarily in a list like this. You can put it in there, but you don't have to have it. Both are perfectly acceptable because you already have a complete independent clause before the colon. Another example, you should remember these 3 things to be healthy, colon. That's introducing, obviously, because you're expecting to hear what the 3 things are. Eat, sleep, and bathe. Okay? There's the word and in the list. As I said, you can go with it, without it. It's not going to hurt you either way. Sometimes you might see these on lists in emails or letters or something like that, where they might number the items down below it. I'm bringing the following items on our trip: 1 suitcase, 2 suntan lotion, 3 trombone, 4 umbrella, 5, I'm hoping like clothes of some sort, will be added to that list. Uh, if you can do that with a straight list going down below, and you still use a colon to introduce that list, whether you have the numbers there or not, it works fine. It's just the colon is, shows that it's part of introducing that list. Then the next one is for emphasis. Okay, this is very similar to introducing a list, but generally it's talking about one item as opposed to a list of things. And the way that it works is whatever you're talking about before the colon, it's leading you, it's kind of introducing once again that one item that's afterwards, and you emphasize it with that. Okay? So, for example, there's one strange person working in this school, colon, Mr. Cook. Okay? That's introducing, it's emphasizing everything that you were talking about before the colon ties in with that thing after the colon. This one, everybody should really write down. Evil is being brought out by one being, Elmo. Okay? Write that down. Lock that into your memories. I'll be happy to explain why later. Another example. The burglar misjudged one key item, the angry dogs. Okay? I mainly just wrote that one because I like the picture of the German Shepherds over there. But you can see that that is emphasizing. You can argue that the stuff before the colon is emphasizing the second part. Really what it's doing is it's leading to that one specific thing that you want to put emphasis on. Elmo. Angry dogs. Okay? That's when you would use the colon. Here are some more other common colon rules. These are ones that I'm sure you're all familiar with, or most of them you've seen all the time to the point where you don't really recognize, like, oh yeah, that's a colon. One would be digital time. Obviously, you look at it, it says 11:30 a.m. anti-meridian. By the way, as a little side note, I like to throw in side notes. If you didn't know, meridian means halfway. Anti, A-N-T-E, which is what we're talking about here, not A-N-T-I. That means against. This means A-N-T-E means before, like if you ante into a poker game. Anti-meridian means before midday, okay, before the middle. That's why it's called AM. And PM means post-meridian. Just a little extra information for you. But here in digital time, you use a colon, 11:30. After salutations in letters. Now, if you were writing a personal letter to a family member or friend or something like that, you would use a comma after your salutation. But in formal business letters, or you're going to be writing some introductory letters of yourself, maybe as a cover letter for a job or entry into a university or whatever it might be. The salutations is usually the dear so and so, or like dear Dr. Franks, or it could be to whom it may concern, colon. Okay? And by the way, for that, the to whom it may concern, each letter gets capitalized. To whom it may concern. They all get their own capital letters too. And then you just put the colon there. Another one is chapter and verse in a Bible. You see those in there, like Matthew 6, colon 1 to 13. Okay, that's the chapter and the verse. Another one is between titles and subtitles. Okay, you know that you've seen books out there or movies where the main title is listed first, then they'll have a colon, and then they'll have the subtitle after it. Avengers colon Endgame might be one. This book is still being written, I'm sure, by someone. Mr. Cook colon A Legend in Time. Okay, so that's the title and the subtitles. You would put a colon between those as well. All right, so that's it. Those are your semicolon and colon rules. I'll have a little practice thing for you tomorrow to do with these. But today, all you had to do is just make sure you have notes on it. And if you have any questions about it, either contact me through email or however it is, or don't forget, I will also be doing those Zoom meetings. Okay? Have a wonderful rest of your day.